Clara stood at the window, staring at the cold, gray street outside. The city was loud, dirty, and full of strangers who never smiled. She worked 12 hours a day sewing clothes in a dusty shop. Her hands were always sore, her back always stiff. But worse than the pain was the silence. Clara had no family, no friends, and no one waiting for her when she came home. Every day was the same, and every night felt empty. She often whispered to herself, "There has to be more than this." One evening, after another long day, Clara saw something strange. An old woman in her boarding house left a newspaper on the table. As Clara picked it up, a small box of printed words caught her eye. It read, "Rancher seeks wife. Mail order arrangement. Must be kind, honest, willing to begin a new life. Reply with letter." Clara blinked. Her heart beating faster. She had heard of mail-order brides, but never thought she'd be one. But something about those words pulled at her. A new life. A kind man. The open sky sounded like a dream. For 3 days she thought about that ad. What if he was a bad man? What if it was a lie? But what if it was real? What if it was her only chance to be truly seen? Finally, late one night, she sat at her small wooden desk. She lit a candle and began to write, "Dear Sir, my name is Clara Bennett. I live in the city, and life here has been hard." She told him about her job, her lonely room, her hopes for something better. "I am honest, I work hard, and I wish to build a home with someone good." When she sealed the letter, her hands shook. She didn't sleep that night, afraid she had done something foolish. Weeks passed with no reply, and Clara tried to forget about it. But one morning, a letter arrived with her name written in strong, uneven letters. She opened it with shaking fingers. Inside were kind words, simple words. "Dear Miss Bennett, my name is Bo. I live on a ranch far west." Your letter was like sunshine. He told her about his land, his horses, and how the nights could be lonely. He didn't speak like a fancy man, but his words were warm. He said he wanted a partner. It's not just a wife. "If you come, I'll treat you with respect and do my best every day." And at the bottom, he added, "I'm not good with words, but I'm good with my hands." Clara smiled, then cried. No one had ever written her a letter like that before. They exchanged more letters, each one longer and more honest. She asked about his childhood, his dreams, even his favorite food. He told her he lost his brother in a cattle stampede, his parents in a winter storm. He was all alone on the land, and maybe he hoped not for much longer. He sent a photo blurry and dark, but she could see a man in a suit standing beside a horse. To Clara, it looked like hope in the final letter. Bo wrote, "If you still want to come, I'll be waiting at the station on the 1st of June." Wearing a brown hat and boots, Clara read it again and again, then folded it and placed it close to her heart. She sold most of her belongings, kept only one suitcase, and gave notice at her job. Her co-workers laughed, called her crazy, warned her he might be a criminal or a liar, but Clara just smiled and whispered, "I'd rather risk something than stay here forever." On the last morning of May, Clara put on her best dress. She tied her brown hair back and placed the photo in her coat. The train whistled blew, loud and long, as it pulled away from the station. Clara didn't look back. She stared at the fields, the sky, the clouds. 1,000 thoughts ran through her mind: fear, excitement, doubt, hope. She held on to the letter with both hands. The letter that changed her life. The letter that might lead to love or disaster. And far out west, a man named Bo stood at a small station, waiting, a brown hat in his hand, and his heart pounding like a wild horse. Clara stepped off the train with her heart beating faster than ever before. The station was small, with no roof, no signs, and barely a bench to sit. Dust danced in the wind as the train rolled away, leaving her alone. She clutched her suitcase tightly and scanned the people standing nearby. She looked for the man in the suit from the photo, the gentleman she had imagined. But all she saw was a tall figure leaning against a post. He wore an old brown hat, a dusty shirt, heavy boots caked with dried mud. His arms were crossed, and his face was rough like the land itself. Clara's heart sank. Could that really be Bo? He didn't look like the man in the photo. He didn't look like a man who wrote sweet letters or talked about sunsets. He looked like a cowboy, one who had seen storms, fought animals, and worked until his bones ached. The man tipped his hat and walked toward her. "You, Clara." he asked, his voice deep and quiet. She nodded slowly, unsure what to say. I'm Bo, he said. Wasn't expecting you to be so small. Clara didn't know if that was a compliment or not. She forced a smile and whispered, You look different from your photo. Bo scratched his neck, embarrassed. Yeah, I guess I cleaned up for that one, he said with a half-smile. There was a long silence between them. Bo looked at her suitcase, then picked it up without asking. Wagons this way, he said, walking toward a wooden cart tied to 2 horses. Clara followed, feeling unsure, confused, and a little afraid she had dreamed of a gentleman who would hold her hand and help her into a carriage. Instead, she climbed into a wagon with splinters and creaking wheels. She sat beside a stranger who smelled of smoke and leather. The road was rough and silent. Clara tried to start a conversation, but Bo didn't say much. When she asked about the ranch, he only said, Still standing? When she asked about animals, he nodded. Plenty of them. She began to wonder, was this the same man who called her Sunshine in his letters? As they reached the ranch, Clara saw miles of open land, fences that leaned sideways, barns that looked tired, and a small wooden house with a broken porch step. This is home, Bo said, helping her down. Clara nodded politely, hiding the twist in her stomach. It was nothing like she imagined, not clean, not grand, not gentle. Bo opened the cabin door and stepped aside for her. You'll sleep here. I'll take the barn, he said, placing her bag near the bed. I don't bite, Clara, but I snore like a bull, he added with a small chuckle. Clara stood in the middle of the room, speechless. The cabin was neat, but plain, no curtains, no soft chairs, no pictures, only a wooden table, 1 bed, a fire stove, and a single window. Bo nodded, then turned to leave. If you need anything, just yell, he said before she could reply. The door creaked shut that night. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the candlelight. Tears welled up in her eyes. This was not what she expected, not even close. She pulled out the letters from her bag, reading Bo's words again. Were those words lies? Or was there something he couldn't show in person? Suddenly, through the thin walls, she heard a soft voice. Bo was in the barn. He's talking to one of his horses. She's here now. Bucky, he said, his voice tender. I ain't good at talking, but I hope she gives me a chance. Clara froze. Surprised, it was the first time she had heard him sound unsure, almost gentle. She listened as he brushed the horse and said, She's real pretty, too. Hope she don't run off. A tear rolled down Clara's cheek. Maybe this cowboy wasn't a liar. Maybe he was just a man who didn't know how to show softness. Maybe, under all that dust and silence, was the heart from those letters. Clara blew out the candle and lay down. As the wind howled outside, she whispered, We'll see, Bo. We'll see. The sun rose slowly over Bo's ranch, spreading warm gold light across the fields. Clara stepped out of the cabin, still unsure about this strange new life. Bo was already awake, busy fixing the fence near the barn. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just nodded once when he noticed her. Clara felt a mix of disappointment and confusion. The man from the letters had sounded warm and open, but the cowboy in front of her was quiet, guarded, and hard to read. Morning, Bo said finally, wiping sweat from his brow. Clara answered softly. Morning. She wished he would talk more, explain more, anything. But Bo simply pointed toward the cabin. I left breakfast on the table. Hope it ain't too cold by now. Clara walked inside and found bread, eggs, and a steaming cup of coffee. It wasn't fancy, but it was thoughtful. She smiled a little as she ate. Maybe Bo cared. Maybe he just didn't know how to show it. Later, Clara decided to clean the cabin. She dusted the shelves, swept the floor, and folded the blankets as she moved the bed to clean beneath it. Something wooden caught her eye, a small box, old, scratched, and hidden deep under the frame. Curiosity tugged at her heart, and she slowly pulled it out and opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them never sent, each one addressed to her. Each one written in Bo's uneven handwriting. Clara sat on the floor, stunned. She picked up the first letter and read it. Miss Clara, I hope you are safe tonight. I ain't good with words, but I'm trying. Her eyes widened. She read another, then another. Some letters talked about the land, others about his fears. One said, if she comes. I hope she likes the cabin. I fixed the roof myself, another said. I lost my brother last winter. The ranch feels empty without him. Clara pressed a hand to her mouth. Bo had written all of this, yet he sent only a few of them. Why? Just then the cabin door creaked open. Bo stood frozen when he saw the box in her lap. His face went red, and he stepped back like he'd been shot. You weren't supposed to read those," he muttered. Clara stood up slowly, unsure if she should apologize or ask more. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to invade your privacy." Bo looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's fine," he said quietly. "Just didn't think anyone would read them." Clara took a deep breath. "Why didn't you send them?" she asked gently. Bo shrugged a little, but his voice cracked. "Letters made me sound better than I am." He met her eyes for a moment. "In real life, I'm just a cowboy with rough hands and a messy ranch." Clara felt her heart soften. The man in front of her wasn't cold. He was scared. Scared she'd see the truth and run. She closed the box and placed it on the bed. "I'm here now," she said softly, "and I'm trying to." Bo said nothing, but his eyes softened before he stepped outside. Clara took a deep breath. Maybe she hadn't made a mistake coming here. Maybe Bo was simply a man who had carried too many burdens alone. Later that day, Clara offered to cook lunch, but as she reached for the old iron stove, Bo suddenly rushed inside. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice filled with fear. Clara jerked back, startled. Bo pointed at the stove, breathing hard. "That thing near blew up on me last year. Burned half my leg." Clara looked at him, shocked. She had never heard him raise his voice like that. Bo calmed himself and whispered, "Didn't mean to scare you, just didn't want you hurt." Clara nodded, touched by his concern. "I didn't know," she said softly. Bo managed a small smile, one that made him look younger. "Gentler. I'll fix it soon," he promised. "Till then, I'll handle the cooking." Clara felt something shift between them. Not love, not yet, but trust. A small beginning, fragile, but real. Just as the day seemed to settle, a horse approached fast from the far end of the ranch. Clara stepped outside in surprise. A woman with bright red hair and bold eyes jumped off the saddle. She hugged Bo tightly, laughing. "Well, Cowboy, didn't think I'd see you again," she said loudly. Clara froze, her heart twisting painfully. Who was she? Why was Bo smiling back? And why did Clara suddenly feel like she didn't belong here at all? Clara stood frozen on the front porch. The red-haired woman had just wrapped her arms around Bo. She laughed loudly, calling him Cowboy like it was a private joke. Bo looked surprised but didn't pull away. Clara's hands clenched the wooden railing, her heart beating faster. Was this woman someone Bo had never mentioned in his letters? Someone he had once loved or still did? "Rosie," Bo said, stepping back from her. "What are you doing here?" Rosie grinned and placed a hand on her hip. "Just passing through," she said. "Saw your horses near the ridge and figured I'd stop by." Her eyes drifted to Clara, who still stood quietly by the door. Rosie tilted her head. "And this must be your bride." Clara nodded stiffly, unsure what to say. Rosie walked up, all confidence and perfume. She extended her hand with a wide smile. "Name's Rosie Taylor, old friend of Bo's." Clara shook her hand slowly, her mind spinning. "Old friend?" she repeated in her thoughts. "Or something more?" Bo cleared his throat and rubbed the back of his neck. "Rosie helped me out last spring. When the barn caught fire," he said. "She knows horses better than most men." Clara nodded again, still quiet. Rosie leaned in with a smirk. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm not here to take your man." Bo looked embarrassed, but Clara couldn't tell if he was flustered or hiding something. Rosie talked like she owned every room she walked into. She told stories of rodeos, broken fences, wild cattle, and once even wrestling a bear trap open with her bare hands. Bo chuckled at her stories, and Clara noticed something she hadn't seen before, a spark in Bo's eyes when he looked at Rosie. Later that evening, Rosie stayed for supper. Bo cooked beans and cornbread over the fire, and the three of them sat around the table. Rosie asked Clara questions about city life, sewing jobs and dresses, but every word felt like a test, every smile a challenge. Clara answered politely, but inside she felt smaller and smaller. Rosie was loud, bold, fearless, and everything Clara was not. When Rosie finally said her goodbyes, she gave Bo a long look. "If you ever need anything, you know where to find me," she said. She mounted her horse and rode off like a dust storm. Clara stood watching her disappear, the silence returning slowly. Bo glanced at Clara and said, "She's just a friend." But Clara didn't look at him. She simply nodded and walked back inside. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay on the small bed, staring at the wooden ceiling. The letters in her bag felt heavier than before. Was Bo really being honest? Why had he never mentioned Rosie? Not even once in all his letters. Did he still love her? Was Clara just a replacement for someone bolder, stronger, braver? The next morning, Bo was already outside chopping wood. Clara stayed inside and washed dishes that weren't dirty, just to keep her hands busy. When Bo came in, he looked at her carefully. "You're quiet this morning," he said softly. Clara looked up, then finally spoke. "Why didn't you ever tell me about Rosie?" Bo set down the bucket he was holding. "She wasn't important," he said quickly, too quickly. "She helped me when I got hurt. That's all." Clara folded a cloth slowly, thinking. "But the way you looked at her," she said. "It didn't feel like nothing." Bo sighed and leaned against the table. "I won't lie," he said. "Rosie's strong, loud and wild. But I never loved her." He looked straight at Clara now. "She's not the reason I wrote all those letters." Clara wanted to believe him, but the doubt still sat heavy in her chest. Bo walked closer, his voice softer. "Rosie's part of the past." "Clara," he said. "But you came here for a new life, and I don't want to mess that up." There was honesty in his eyes now. A rawness Clara hadn't seen before. She looked at him, searching his face for anything false, but saw only fear and hope. Still, something inside her whispered caution. Trust wasn't something you gave after a few kind words. It had to be built slowly, carefully, like a fragile fence after a storm. "I want to believe you," Clara said, her voice calm but serious. "But if there's more I should know, please don't keep it from me." Bo nodded. His jaw tight. "I promise," he said. "No more secrets." Outside, the wind picked up again, whistling across the fields. Clara stood at the window and watched it move through the grass. Rosie was gone, but her shadow lingered in Clara's thoughts. Still, something had shifted again. Bo had spoken with truth, and in the silence that followed, Clara whispered to herself, "I'll stay, but only if I'm seen, not just kept." The sky turned dark faster than usual that evening. Clouds gathered like thick blankets, rolling low across the plains. Clara stood on the porch, staring at the horizon. The wind carried the scent of rain, sharp and cold. Inside the barn, Bo was feeding the horses, humming softly to himself. He looked up when the first raindrop hit the dust. "Storm's coming fast," he called to Clara. "Tie the shutters tight." Clara ran inside and did as he said. She had seen storms before, but not like this. The wind howled louder with each minute, shaking the walls. Bo rushed into the cabin, soaked and muddy. "We'll ride it out," he said. Placing extra logs in the fire, the roof creaked and groaned, but it held. Clara sat near the fire, clutching a blanket. Her heart racing, Bo sat beside her, not saying much, but his presence gave her calm. Suddenly, a loud crack shook the sky. Then a bright flash and, moments later, a thunderous boom. Clara jumped, eyes wide. Bo's face turned pale. He leaped to his feet and opened the door. Smoke, thick and black, rose from the barn. "The lightning hit it," he said, voice tight with panic. Without hesitation, Bo ran toward the flames. Clara screamed after him, "Bo, no!" But he was already gone, his figure vanishing into smoke and fire. She grabbed 2 buckets and ran after him. Barefoot on the wet ground, the fire roared like a wild beast, hungry and fast. Bo was inside the barn, yelling for the horses. Clara filled a bucket from the water barrel and tossed it on the wall. She coughed and cried, but didn't stop. Bo dragged out 1 horse, then another. But one remained trapped. "I'm going back in," Bo shouted. Clara tried to stop him, but he was already gone again. The barn's roof sagged, glowing with orange fire. Clara covered her mouth. Helpless. Then Bo stumbled out, carrying the last horse's reins, his clothes smoking. He fell to his knees just outside the flames. Coughing hard, Clara rushed to him and helped him stand. His shirt was burned, his arm bleeding, but he was alive that night. Clara tended to his wounds. She cleaned his cuts with warm water, her hands trembling. Bo didn't say much, only looked at her with tired eyes. "You didn't have to help," he whispered. Clara shook her head. "I wasn't going to let you burn." They sat by the fire until the storm passed. The barn was gone, ashes and black wood all that remained. The horses were safe, but the loss was heavy, still. In the middle of that sadness, something quiet grew between them, a closeness that didn't need words, only presence. The next morning, while Bo slept, Clara stepped outside to feed the chickens. She heard something soft footsteps on the dirt road. She turned and gasped. A small girl, barefoot and covered in soot, stood near the fence. Her hair was tangled, her face smudged with ash. She looked no older than 7. Clara ran to her and knelt down. "Sweetheart, are you hurt?" she asked gently. The girl shook her head, then whispered, "I can't find my mama." Tears filled Clara's eyes. She scooped the girl into her arms and carried her inside. Bo awoke as Clara entered. He sat up quickly, wincing in pain. Who's that?" Clara explained what had happened. Bo stood slowly and knelt beside the girl. "You got a name?" he asked softly. The girl nodded. Ellie, Bo, and Clara cleaned her up, gave her warm soup, and wrapped her in blankets. Ellie told them her parents lived in a cabin 3 miles east, but during the storm, fire had taken their home. She had run blindly through the dark until she saw a light from Clara's lantern. Bo looked at Clara with serious eyes. "I'll go look in the morning, see if anyone else made it." Clara nodded. Holding Ellie close that night, Clara tucked Ellie into her bed. She slept on the chair near her, watching the child breathe. Bo stood at the door and whispered, "You'd make a good mother, Clara." Looked at him, surprised. "I'm not sure I know how," she replied softly. Bo gave a small smile. "You already are outside." The land was quiet again. The storm was gone. The fire had passed. But inside that small cabin, something new had begun. 3 souls, drawn together by chance and survival, and maybe, just maybe, by something deeper. Do something like family? The morning sun rose gently over the burned barn and blackened grass. Smoke still hung in the air. But the danger had passed. Inside the cabin, Clara sat at the table, holding a worn pencil in her hand. Across from her sat Bo. Eyes fixed on the paper, jaw tight with focus, she spoke softly. "All right, now try again. Write your name." Bo's hand trembled as he slowly traced the letters B, then O. He paused, looked up, and laughed nervously. "Still looks like chicken scratches?" Clara smiled gently. "It's better than yesterday," for days. She had been helping him read and write. She'd never imagined she'd be the teacher and Bo the student. But when he confessed the truth 2 nights ago, it had changed everything. He had looked at her with shame in his eyes and whispered, "I didn't write those letters, Clara." She had frozen, unsure what he meant. He had explained, voice low and heavy, "I asked a friend to write them for me. I told him what to say, but I didn't know how to write it myself." Clara had felt shocked, even betrayed, but only for a moment. Because his voice didn't carry pride, it carried pain. He had lied out of fear, not out of cruelty. "You were never lying to hurt me," she had whispered. Bo had shaken his head slowly. "I just didn't want you to think I was stupid." And Clara had said something that surprised even herself. "Then let me teach you now." As they practiced writing together, something deeper grew between them. Not just understanding, but a quiet kind of respect. Bo worked hard, sweating over every letter like it was a nail to be hammered in. And Clara cheered every small success. Even little Ellie clapped her hands when Bo read his first full sentence. The child had become part of their daily rhythm. She followed Clara like a shadow. And Bo, like a favorite uncle. She laughed loudly, asked endless questions, and sang to the chickens. Clara braided her hair in the mornings, and Bo carved a tiny wooden horse for her. But still, Ellie hadn't spoken about her parents again. Every night she whispered only 2 words before sleeping. "Stay safe." One evening, after supper, Clara sat on the porch holding a cup of tea. Bo joined her, quietly sipping from his tin mug. The sky above them was full of stars, brighter than any city sky. "You ever miss it?" Bo asked. "The city life?" Clara thought for a moment, then shook her head. "I miss clean dresses and soft pillows," she said with a smile. "But not the noise, not the loneliness." Bo looked at her, his eyes soft. "I thought you'd leave," he admitted. "After Rosie, after the fire, after finding out I can't read proper." Clara didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned to him and asked, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Bo looked down at his boots. "I was ashamed," he whispered. "My ma died when I was 10. Pa was always busy with cattle. School never mattered." He took a slow breath. "By the time I needed to learn." It felt too late. Clara reached for his hand and held it gently. "It's not too late," she said. "And you're not stupid, Bo. You built all this with your hands. You wrote to me with your heart." He looked at her, eyes glistening in the starlight. "No one's ever said that to me before," he whispered. Clara smiled. "Then I'm glad I came." Just then, the cabin door creaked open. Ellie stood there, rubbing her eyes, holding a blanket. "I had a dream," she said, voice small. Clara stood and walked to her, kneeling down. "Do you want to sleep with me tonight?" Ellie nodded, then looked at Bo. "Can you read me a story?" she asked shyly. Bo blinked in surprise, then looked at Clara, unsure. Clara handed him a small children's book and whispered, "Just try." Bo sat on the edge of the bed, Ellie beside him. He opened the book and slowly began. "Once upon a time." His voice was slow but steady. Ellie leaned on his shoulder, smiling. Clara stood by the doorway, her eyes full. Bo read every word like it was a promise. A promise that he was changing, and that they were becoming something real. That night, as the fire burned low, 3 people slept in a cabin that once held only silence. The truth had been told, and love, though not spoken, was beginning to speak through actions, through simple things, shared books, warm hands, and the courage to be known. The days passed, slowly, filled with hard work and quiet joy. Bo and Clara repaired what the fire had taken. Piece by piece, the barn frame stood tall again. Half finished but strong, Clara planted flowers near the cabin window. Ellie laughed louder every morning, no longer waking from nightmares, and every evening Bo read too, her stumbling through the words but never giving up. It felt like a family, even if no one had said the word aloud, until one morning, a letter arrived, and everything changed. Bo found it in town and brought it back unopened. He handed it to Clara with a puzzled look. "It's from back east," he said. "Your name on it." Clara opened it slowly, her heart already uneasy. Inside was a short note written in clean, rich handwriting. "Clara, word has reached us of your situation. I'm coming to take you home. You don't belong in that wild place. Your cousin James." Clara read the letter twice, her hands trembling. She hadn't heard from James in years, not since her father passed. He had always been cold, strict, full of pride and rules. He didn't write out of love, he wrote out of control. "When's he coming?" Bo asked quietly. Clara swallowed. "He says, 3 days, for the next 2 days. Silence filled the cabin again. Bo worked longer in the fields. Avoiding her eyes, Clara couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Ellie noticed too, asking, "Why is Mama Clara so quiet?" Clara forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She looked around the ranch, the half-built barn, the crooked fences, the creaky porch. It wasn't easy, it wasn't clean, but it was real. It was built with hands and hope and long nights of effort, but her cousin would see only dirt, only failure, only shame. On the 3rd day, just after noon, a black carriage rolled up the dusty road. It stood out like a stone, in soup shiny, perfect, polished. James stepped out in a gray suit and white gloves. He looked around with narrowed eyes. "What a dreadful place," he muttered, loud enough for Bo to hear. Clara stepped forward, her heart pounding. James looked at her like a stray dog. "You've lost weight," he said. "We'll fix that in the city." He glanced at Bo, frowning. "So, this is the cowboy who dragged you out here." Bo stood tall but didn't speak. James turned back to Clara. "I brought a dress for the trip. Proper clothes, not rags." He handed her a bag. "Change and let's go." Clara stared at the bag in her hands. Her fingers tightened around it, but her feet didn't move. James sighed. "You don't belong here, Clara. This isn't your world." Bo looked away, jaw clenched. "If she wants to go, I won't stop her," he said softly. Ellie stood behind Clara, holding her hand. Clara looked down at the little girl's eyes full of fear, full of hope. Then she looked at Bo, burned hands, tired eyes, dusty boots. And she remembered the chair he carved for her, the locket he gave her, the way he tried so hard just to read one page. She dropped the bag, the cloth dress spilling into the dirt. "I'm not going," she said, voice strong. James blinked. "What?" Clara stepped back and took Ellie's hand. "This is my home now," she said. "And these are my people." James looked furious. "You'd throw away silk and safety for mud and animals?" Clara held her head high. "I'd rather live in dust with love than in gold with silence." Bo's eyes widened. His breath caught in his throat. He stepped forward, unsure. Clara turned to him, smiling through tears. "I choose you, Beau," she whispered. "I choose us." James didn't argue. He just turned around, climbed back into his carriage, and rode away without another word as the wheels disappeared into the horizon. Beau walked up to Clara. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice shaking. Clara nodded. "I've never been more sure." Ellie squeezed her hand, whispering. "Mama's staying." Beau looked at them both, his bride, his girl, his world, and finally let his heart speak. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." The black carriage was long gone, swallowed by the dust and the wind. Beau, Clara, and Ellie stood quietly in the fading light. No one said a word, but their hearts beat in the same rhythm, strong, steady, sure. Clara took a deep breath and looked around the ranch. The cabin still leaned slightly to one side. The barn was still half finished. The grass still grew wild between the fence posts. But something had changed. It felt like home now. That night, Beau sat on the porch carving a small wooden heart. Clara rocked Ellie to sleep inside, humming softly. The scent of stew still lingered in the air. The lamp glowed with gentle warmth, casting soft shadows on the walls. Everything was simple, but everything mattered. Beau looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you, Clara." In the morning, the family began a new kind of routine. Beau worked the fields while Clara taught Ellie letters and numbers. Every evening, they all sat together on the porch reading, laughing, or watching the sun disappear behind the hills. Beau started writing short notes to Clara, clumsy but full of feeling. She kept each one in a small box under the bed, the same one that once held his unsent letters. Now it held memories, promises, and the proof of how far he'd come. On Sundays, Beau and Ellie would gather wildflowers for Clara. She placed them in a chipped glass jar near the window. They didn't last long, but the gesture always did. Beau built Ellie a swing from 2 ropes and a wooden seat, hanging it from the lone oak tree. She'd laugh and scream with joy, calling out to the sky, "Mama, Papa, watch me fly." One evening, Beau came in from the barn holding a small box wrapped in cloth. Clara looked at him with raised brows. "What's that?" she asked with a smile. Beau placed it in her hands, nervous and quiet. "Something I made. Been working on it for a while." Clara unwrapped the cloth slowly, and inside was a locket, hand-carved from wood. It wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful. She opened it and found 2 tiny drawings, one of a horse and one of a heart. Beau cleared his throat. Eyes on the floor. "The horse is me, rough and wild, and the heart. That's you." Clara blinked back tears, touched beyond words. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. "You may not be a gentleman from the city," she whispered, "but you're the best man I've ever known." Seasons passed, and the ranch grew stronger. The barn was rebuilt, better than before. The fences stood firm, and Clara's garden bloomed with vegetables and flowers. They adopted Ellie legally, giving her the last name Westfield. She now belonged to a family, not just a place. One night, Ellie asked Beau to read her favorite book. She sat in his lap, hugging a stuffed bear Clara had sewn for her. Beau opened the book and began, "Once upon a time. There was a cowboy who didn't know how to smile." Ellie giggled. "That was you." Beau nodded, until he met a girl who taught him how. Clara watched from the doorway, her heart full. The man who once feared words now read bedtime stories. The child who once arrived lost and silent now laughed freely. And the woman who once searched for a refined gentleman had found something better. A man with calloused hands. A heart that healed and a soul that stayed. Years later, a new rocking chair sat beside the old one. Clara and Beau rocked together, watching Ellie ride her pony across the field. Beau reached for Clara's hand and held it gently. "You ever regret not going back?" he asked softly. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Not even once," she whispered, because their love hadn't come in a fine box with ribbons. It had been carved from storms, fire, fear, and second chances. It had been built slowly, with patience, with tears, and with real effort. And like the land around them, rough, raw, full of life, it was strong. A home built with dust and love, and a story not told in perfect words, but in every sunrise, every swing, every worn-out letter. And the simple truth whispered under the stars, "I'm glad you came."